The Grand Hall of the Galactic Summit was a place where the most powerful leaders of the universe gathered. Today, it was filled with delegates from various species, each representing their own advanced civilizations. Towering insectoid beings, scaled reptilian warlords, and floating energy-based entities all stood together, discussing matters of trade, alliances, and war. At the center of it all, seated on an elevated throne-like chair, was Queen Varelia of the Xilari Dominion. She was young, barely past her first century, but already the ruler of a vast empire. Her people were one of the most dominant species in the galaxy, known for their organic technology and psionic abilities. Unlike most species that relied on metal, circuits, and fuel, the Xilari created weapons and ships from living organisms, bioengineered to be superior in every way. Varelia had never seen a species that could challenge her people's might, until today. She leaned forward, her golden eyes filled with amusement as she looked at the human delegation. They stood together, dressed in military uniforms, their expressions unreadable. Unlike the Xilari, their weapons and armor were crude by comparison. Metal plating, firearms, ballistic shields. Everything about their equipment seemed outdated, inefficient, and weak. Varelia let out a soft, melodic laugh. "Is this truly what humans call military gear?" she said, her voice smooth yet laced with arrogance. "Bulky metal plates, simple kinetic weapons. You fight like the warriors of ancient times. No self-repairing armor, no psionic enhancements. How do you expect to survive in real battle?" The room grew silent as all eyes turned toward the leader of the human delegation, Captain Elias Carter. He was a tall man with graying hair and a sharp gaze, his expression unreadable. Unlike the others, he did not flinch at her words. Instead, he simply smiled. "Survival isn't about the tools you use, Your Majesty," Carter said, his voice steady. "It's about how you use them." The Queen raised an eyebrow. She had expected anger, maybe even embarrassment, but Carter showed neither. His confidence was strange, almost unsettling. One of Varelia's generals, a towering Xilari warrior covered in sleek bio-armor, stepped forward. His golden carapace shimmered under the summit's lights. Perhaps the humans would care to prove that statement. He said, his voice deep and layered with a natural psychic resonance. Varelia's smirk widened. "Yes, why not? Let us test your so-called skill. A simple combat trial, your soldiers against mine." She gestured toward Carter. "If your people are as capable as you claim, let them show us. Or, if you prefer, you may admit defeat now and save yourself the embarrassment." The other alien delegates murmured among themselves. The Xilari were legendary warriors, their forces nearly unbeatable. No one expected the humans to accept such a reckless challenge. But Carter did not hesitate. "We accept." Varelia blinked, momentarily surprised. Then she let out a laugh, a rich, delighted sound. "Interesting. Very well, Captain Carter. In 3 days, we shall have our trial." The Queen stood, her regal robes flowing around her. "Let all who are present witness humanity's defeat." As she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of Carter's face. He was still smiling, not the smile of a fool walking into a trap, but the smile of a man who knew something she didn't. For the first time in her life, Queen Varelia felt something unexpected: doubt. The news of the upcoming combat trial spread quickly across the Galactic Summit. Delegates from different species whispered among themselves, some amused, others curious. The Xilari Dominion had never lost a battle in recorded history, and many believed that this contest would be over in mere minutes. The battlefield was chosen, a vast artificial training ground on the summit's military station. It was a massive arena, filled with simulated environments, rocky cliffs, dense forests, and ruined buildings. It was designed to test warriors in different conditions, making the fight as real as possible. 3 days passed quickly. Queen Varelia stood on the observation deck, watching as her elite Xilari warriors marched into the battlefield. Each warrior stood over 7 feet tall, their sleek bio-armor shifting and pulsing as if alive. Their weapons, organic-looking rifles and blades, hummed with energy, responding to their neural commands. They did not need radios to communicate. Their psionic link kept them perfectly synchronized. She smiled. This would be an easy victory. Then the humans arrived. Led by Captain Elias Carter, the human soldiers moved in perfect formation. Their armor was metal, bulky compared to the living suits of the Xilari. Their weapons fired bullets instead of energy beams, and yet they moved with quiet confidence, setting up positions, checking their gear with practiced efficiency. Varelia narrowed her eyes. Why did they look so calm? She turned to Carter, who stood beside her on the observation deck. "You still have time to back out, Captain," she said, smirking. "My warriors do not show mercy. This will not be a pleasant experience for your people." Carter chuckled softly. "Mercy? That's funny. You act like we haven't faced worse." Before she could respond, a loud horn signaled the start of the battle. The battle begins. The Xilari warriors charged forward, moving with unnatural speed. Their armor adapted to the terrain, shifting colors like a chameleon. Their psionic abilities allowed them to sense movement, predict attacks, and strike with terrifying precision. One of them, a towering warrior named Varish, locked onto a human soldier taking cover behind a fallen tree. With a flick of his wrist, his bio-rifle fired an energy bolt, melting through the wood instantly. But when he rushed forward to finish the human, the soldier was gone. A sudden explosion erupted behind him. A human grenade. The force sent Varish crashing into a rock, his armor cracking from the impact. He growled, shaking off the damage, but the humans were already moving. Unlike the Xilari, who relied on individual skill and power, the humans fought as a unit. They communicated through radios, adjusting their positions within seconds. Every move was calculated. Every shot was precise. One soldier fired at Xilari's legs, forcing him to stumble. Another tossed a smoke grenade, blinding their enemies. A sniper, hidden in the cliffs, picked off isolated warriors one by one. Varelia frowned. This was not how the battle was supposed to go. Xilari overconfidence turns to panic. The Xilari warriors had never fought enemies like this. Most species relied on strength or technology, but humans, they used everything. They didn't charge in recklessly. They didn't waste energy in flashy displays of power. They fought smart. And worst of all, they adapted. One Xilari warrior tried using his psionic abilities to predict a human's movement, only for the human to suddenly change direction, zigzagging unpredictably. Another warrior attempted to regenerate his armor after taking damage, but before the process could finish, a well-placed bullet shattered his exposed weak spot. "Impossible," Varelia muttered, gripping the rail of the observation deck. Her warriors were losing. One by one, the Xilari fell. Their numbers were cut in half within minutes. The humans had no energy weapons, no psionic powers, no organic armor, yet they were winning. The battlefield was now silent, except for the sound of gunfire and the distant shouts of humans giving orders. Varelia clenched her fists. This wasn't over yet. Carter's confidence. "Your warriors are strong, Queen Varelia," Carter said casually, watching the battle unfold. "But strength alone doesn't win wars." She turned to him, her golden eyes burning with frustration. "What trickery is this? Your weapons are simple, your armor is weak. And yet," Carter gave her a small smile, "you thought technology alone made you superior. But war isn't just about who has the best gear. It's about who knows how to use it." Varelia said nothing. For the first time in her life, she realized something terrifying. The humans were not weak. And now, she had to watch as they proved it. The battlefield was a mess of smoke, broken weapons, and injured warriors. The Xilari, once seen as the undefeated champions of the galaxy, were struggling. Their numbers had been cut down. Their strategies, which had worked for centuries against other species, were failing. Queen Varelia stood frozen on the observation deck, her golden eyes locked on the screens. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her warriors, her proud elite, were losing to humans. A powerful warrior named Varish was one of the last standing Scifi commanders. He growled in frustration, his bio-armor shifting to cover his injuries. He refused to lose. He had never lost a battle before, and he would not lose to these strange, weak-looking creatures. He activated his psionic link, sending orders directly into the minds of his remaining warriors. Regroup. Focus on one target at a time. Overwhelm them. They cannot fight us in close combat. His warriors obeyed, moving with renewed determination. Varish spotted a group of humans advancing through the ruined buildings. Their formation was tight, moving as a single unit, but he saw an opportunity. With a flick of his wrist, he commanded his warriors to rush them. Scifi warriors moved like shadows, fast and silent. They darted between the ruins, leaping over obstacles with inhuman speed. One Scifi pounced from above, his energy blade slicing toward a human soldier's neck. But before he could land his strike, bang! A precise gunshot echoed through the battlefield. The Scifi warrior collapsed midair, a bullet cleanly piercing through his weak spot. Varish barely had time to process what happened when another explosion went off near his team, a hidden landmine. They knew. Varish's mind raced. The humans had predicted this attack. But how? The power of human strategy. The humans didn't rely on brute strength like the Scifi. They relied on tactics, coordination, and prediction. Before the Scifi had even started their charge, human scouts had already detected their movements. Drones, sensors, and old-fashioned instincts told them exactly where the enemy would attack from. And so, the humans had set traps. As Varish and his warriors charged forward, they stepped into a kill zone, an area the humans had already prepared with snipers, explosives, and defensive positions. One by one, the Scifi fell. The moment the first landmine exploded, the humans opened fire from multiple angles. Gunfire roared through the battlefield. Scifi warriors, caught in the open, had nowhere to run. Their bio-armor was powerful, but it couldn't stop every bullet. And worse, the humans were aiming for weak spots. They had learned. Varelia's hands clenched into fists as she watched her proud warriors get torn apart. This isn't possible, she whispered. But it was happening, right in front of her. Carter's warning. Captain Elias Carter stood beside her, watching the battle with a calm expression. He could feel the Queen's frustration. Her confidence from earlier had vanished. "You assumed we were weak, didn't you?" Carter said, his voice casual. Varelia turned to him, anger in her eyes. "Your weapons are primitive. Your armor is outdated. And yet, you're winning." Carter smirked. "Because war isn't about who has the best toys. It's about who uses them best." He stepped closer, looking her directly in the eyes. "You Scifi have spent centuries winning through sheer strength. You never had to think differently. You never had to adapt." Varelia didn't respond, because she knew he was right. Her species had never faced an enemy like this. Every war they fought was against creatures slower, weaker, or technologically inferior. They had never fought an enemy who could outthink them. And now, they were paying the price. The final stand. On the battlefield, Varish was the last one standing. His warriors were dead or unconscious. His armor was cracked and broken. His energy blade flickered weakly. But he refused to surrender. He turned to face the humans, his breathing heavy. If he was going to fall, he would fall like a warrior. He gripped his blade tightly in charge. The nearest human raised his weapon. But Carter's voice boomed through the comms. "Hold your fire." The soldiers hesitated, confused. Varish stopped in his tracks, breathing hard. Carter stepped forward, looking down at the beaten Scifi warrior. "You fought well." His voice was calm, but firm. But this fight is over. Stand down. Varish's muscles tensed. His pride told him to keep fighting. But deep down he knew. He had already lost. Slowly, painfully, he dropped his blade. The battlefield was silent. The war was over. And for the first time in her life, Queen Virelia had no words. The battlefield was silent. The Xilari warriors, once proud and undefeated, lay motionless across the ruined landscape. Some were dead. Others were injured. A few were barely conscious, their bio-armor flickering weakly, struggling to keep them alive. Queen Virelia stood on the command deck, her golden eyes locked on the scene below. Her heart pounded in her chest. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Her warriors were the best in the galaxy, trained, enhanced, and armed with superior technology. The humans should have stood no chance. And yet, she watched Varish, her strongest commander, kneeling in the dirt. His blade was gone. His armor was cracked. His energy had been drained. And in front of him stood Captain Ilias Carter, his soldiers surrounding the Xilari warrior. Carter's voice was calm but firm. This fight is over. Varish, breathing hard, looked up at him. His pride screamed at him to fight, to resist. But his body refused. With great hesitation, he bowed his head. Surrender. Virelia's hands trembled. Her warriors had never surrendered before. Not once. She slammed her fist against the control panel, making her officers flinch. No, this is not possible. Her voice was low but filled with rage. But the truth was in front of her. The Xilari had lost. And worse, the humans had barely broken a sweat. A different kind of power. Ilias Carter didn't smile. He didn't celebrate. He simply turned and gave orders. Secure the wounded. Treat them. We are not here to kill needlessly. His soldiers moved quickly, applying medical aid, not just to their own people, but to the Xilari as well. A medic knelt beside a fallen Xilari warrior, pressing a bandage against a deep wound. The alien flinched in confusion. Hold still. I'm stopping the bleeding, the human said. The Xilari's glowing eyes widened. He did not expect this. Humans weren't killing them. They were helping them. Virelia saw this on the screen and felt her stomach twist. This was why humans were dangerous. Not just because they could outthink her warriors. Not just because they could fight differently. It was because they knew when to stop. The Xilari only understood victory or death. They never showed mercy, never healed an enemy, never spared a life. Humans were different. They fought harder than any species she had seen, but when the fight was over, they chose to be kind. And that was a power that Xilari did not understand. The Queen faces Carter. An hour later, Queen Virelia stood inside the human command center. She had no choice. Her warship was in orbit, but the humans had full control of the battlefield. Her warriors were too injured or too shaken to continue fighting. Carter stood across from her, arms crossed, calm as ever. Virelia's voice was sharp. Are you going to mock me now, Captain? Carter raised an eyebrow. Mock you? Why would I do that? She clenched her fists. You beat us. Completely. Isn't this the moment where you tell me how foolish I was? How weak my people are? Isn't that what a conqueror does? Carter chuckled, shaking his head. We're not conquerors, Queen Virelia. We don't fight wars just to crush others. We fight when we have to. And when it's over, we move forward. She narrowed her eyes. You mean you won't take control? No demands. No humiliation. Carter sighed. Look, Queen, if I wanted to humiliate you, I'd remind you how you laughed at our primitive weapons before we outmaneuvered your entire army. Virelia's face darkened. But I'm not going to do that, Carter continued, because I'm not here to make enemies. I'd rather make allies. Virelia stared at him, confused. He should be mocking her. He should be making demands. That was how war worked, wasn't it? But this human, he was offering peace. You want an alliance. After this? She asked. Carter shrugged. We both learned something today. You learned not to underestimate humans, and I learned that the Xilari are strong, but they lack adaptability. Imagine what we could accomplish together instead of fighting. Virelia stayed silent. The idea of working with humans was unthinkable. Just a day ago, she would have laughed at it. But now, maybe she wasn't as smart as she thought. Maybe, for once, she needed to listen. The beginning of something new. Virelia didn't answer right away. She didn't know what to say. Instead, she looked at the screens, showing her warriors being treated by human medics. She saw a Xilari soldier hesitate, unsure if he should accept a water bottle from a human. Slowly, cautiously, he reached out and took it. Maybe there was another way. Finally, she looked back at Carter. If I agree to an alliance, what happens next? Carter smiled. We start rebuilding. Together. For the first time in her life, Queen Virelia did not feel like a ruler. She felt like a student of a species that had just changed everything she knew about war. And maybe about the future. Queen Virelia sat in the Human Command Center, her sharp golden eyes studying Captain Elias Carter. His offer still echoed in her mind. An alliance with humans. It was unthinkable. The Xilari had always believed themselves to be superior warriors, unmatched in strength and technology. They had never needed help from another species. Yet here she was. Her warriors were defeated. Their bio-armor was shattered. Their strongest commander had surrendered. And the humans? They had won effortlessly, using weapons she had once mocked. She clenched her fists. This was humiliating. But what choice did she have? Virelia took a slow breath. If I agree to this alliance, what do you expect from me? Carter leaned back, calm as always. We don't expect anything, Queen. We want cooperation, not control. You keep your rule, your people, your culture. But instead of fighting us, we help each other. She narrowed her eyes. And if I refuse? Carter sighed. Then we both waste more resources in a war you can't win. More of your warriors will die. More of my soldiers will get hurt. But eventually, the result will be the same. We will win. And then what? Do you really want to risk the extinction of your people because of your pride? Virelia felt her stomach twist. She hated how logical his words were. Her silence stretched between them. Finally, she looked at the screen again, her injured warriors being treated by humans instead of being executed. The Xilari never did that for their enemies. Maybe it was time for a new way of thinking. Very well, Captain Carter, she said at last. I will consider your offer, but I need to speak with my people first. Carter nodded. Take your time, Queen. But don't take too long. The galaxy isn't kind to those who hesitate. A divided people. Virelia returned to her warriors, their wounds still fresh from battle. She could see the confusion in their faces, the doubt in their eyes. Her people had never lost before. And now, their queen was speaking of an alliance. Varish, the strongest of them, stepped forward. His injuries were bandaged, thanks to human medics, but his expression was hard and unreadable. My queen, I heard the humans' offer. Is it true? His voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge beneath it. Virelia met his gaze. Yes, it is true. They do not seek conquest. They seek cooperation. The warriors murmured amongst themselves, exchanging glances, uncertainty, disbelief. Varish clenched his jaw. You expect us to trust them, after they defeated us, after they shamed us. Virelia's eyes flashed with warning. They did not shame us. They were simply better. The words felt bitter on her tongue, but they were true. Varish inhaled sharply, his pride wounded. And now we bow to them. Virelia shook her head. No, we learn from them. We adapt. That is what warriors do. The murmurs grew louder, some warriors agreeing, others resisting. One soldier growled, they fight differently. They are unpredictable. It is unnatural. Varelia smirked. Unnatural, yet effective. And they have something we do not. Compassion. Look around you. They saved our wounded, even after we tried to kill them. If the roles were reversed, would we have done the same? No one answered, because they all knew the truth. The Xilari did not spare enemies. They are strong because they understand both war and peace. Varelia continued. We only understand war. That is why we lost. Varish exhaled through his nose, his fists still clenched, but he nodded slowly. So what happens now, my queen? He asked. Varelia's voice was firm. Now we decide if we will repeat the mistakes of the past or evolve for the future. The queen's message. Later that evening, Varelia stood before the Xilari War Council, speaking to the commanders who remained on her fleet. Most were still in shock from the battle's outcome. She looked at each one before speaking. We believed humans were weak, that they relied on primitive technology. We laughed at them. We thought we were untouchable. She let her words hang in the air. And then they crushed us. Silence. We underestimated them. And in war, underestimation leads to destruction. But humans are different from any enemy we have faced. They do not seek our extinction. They offer an alliance. One of the generals scoffed. And you trust them? Varelia's golden eyes hardened. No, but I respect them. And respect is more powerful than trust. The council exchanged glances. Varelia stepped forward. You may see this as defeat. I see it as an opportunity. An opportunity to learn, to grow, to become something greater than just a warrior race. Humans have shown us a new path. We would be fools to ignore it. The generals were silent, deep in thought. Finally, one of them spoke. And if we refuse? Varelia's voice was cold. Then we prepare for another war. A war we will not win. The weight of her words settled over the room. For the first time in their history, the Xilari were at a crossroads. Continue down the old path of war and face extinction, or take the unknown road of alliance. Varelia stood tall. She had made her choice. Now, it was time to see if her people would follow. Queen Varelia stood on the bridge of her damaged flagship, her golden eyes scanning the vast darkness of space. The battle was over, but the real challenge had just begun. Her warriors were restless. Some accepted her decision to negotiate with the humans, while others, especially the older commanders, saw it as a disgrace. The Xilari had never bowed to anyone. They had never admitted weakness. And yet, here they were, depending on human aid to survive. Varelia clenched her fists. Pride had led them to defeat. Pride alone would not save them now. The unexpected lesson. Captain Elias Carter's voice crackled over the communication link. Queen Varelia, our engineers have finished repairs on your main power systems. Your fleet will have basic functionality restored soon. Varelia inhaled sharply. The humans had repaired their ships. She expected negotiations, perhaps a reluctant truce, but not genuine assistance. You repaired our systems, without asking for anything in return, she asked cautiously. Carter chuckled. That's what allies do. We don't leave people stranded. Allies. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Xilari never had allies, only subordinates or enemies. Varish, her strongest warrior, crossed his arms beside her. His wounds were still healing, but his pride was hurt the most. This is a trick, my queen, he whispered. They want us weak. They want us to depend on them. Varelia studied the human fleet in the distance. Their ships were not the most advanced, but they were efficient and durable, a perfect reflection of human nature itself. No, Varish, she said finally. They want something different. They do not conquer through fear. They conquer through unity, and that is why they are stronger than us. Varish's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Understanding human strength. To learn more about their allies, Varelia accepted Carter's invitation to visit the human capital ship. She expected to find a place of rigid military order, much like the auxiliary warships. Instead, she saw something entirely different. As she walked through the human ship, she saw laughter, camaraderie, soldiers training together, exchanging jokes, engineers working tirelessly, not out of fear, but out of dedication to their people. It was strange. On its Scifi warship, everything was about efficiency and control. There was no room for weakness, no tolerance for mistakes. Here, humans embraced their flaws. They learned from failure. They adapted. She stopped at one of the human training areas, watching two soldiers sparring. Their movements were fast and unpredictable. Unlike Scifi combat, which relied on brute strength, humans used strategy and deception. Carter walked beside her. "What do you think?" Virelia was silent for a moment before speaking. "Your people are different from mine. We train for war. You train for survival." Carter nodded. "That's the difference between fighting to win and fighting to live. We don't fight for glory. We fight for each other." The words hit her harder than any weapon ever had. The Auxiliary fought for conquest. Humans fought for each other. That was the secret to their strength. A test of trust. As their alliance discussions continued, an emergency alert suddenly echoed through the human ship. "Unknown vessels detected. They're heading straight for us." Carter's expression hardened. "Not ours." "Are they yours?" Virelia checked the incoming signal and her stomach dropped. "No, they are not Auxiliary." The screen showed the Sci-Fi Dominion, a brutal species that neither humans nor Auxiliary had encountered in direct battle before. And they were coming fast. "They are raiders," Virelia said grimly. "They destroy weaker fleets and steal their resources. If they think we are vulnerable, they will not hesitate to attack." Carter crossed his arms. "Then let's show them we're not weak." Virelia turned to him. "You are willing to fight alongside us, even after everything." Carter grinned. "Isn't that what allies do?" Virelia took a deep breath. This was it, a real test of trust and unity. Her warriors would fight alongside humans, not as enemies, not as conquerors, but as equals, preparing for battle. Back on her flagship, Virelia addressed her warriors one last time. "We were wrong about humans," she said firmly. "They are not weak. They are not primitive. They are survivors, and they have extended their hand in alliance. We now stand at a turning point. We can either embrace this chance or perish." Varish, still skeptical, asked, "And if they betray us?" Virelia's gaze was sharp. "Then we will fight. But not today. Today, we fight together." The Auxiliary warriors roared in approval. For the first time in their history, they were not fighting alone. As the Sci-Fi fleet approached, Virelia felt something new inside her, something she had never felt in battle before. Hope. The Auxiliary and humans would fight as one, and together, they would win. The bridge of the Auxiliary flagship was silent, except for the quiet hum of energy weapons charging. Queen Virelia stood at the center, her golden eyes fixed on the massive Sci-Fi fleet approaching. The humans had taken their positions beside them, their ships forming a defensive line. For the first time in Auxiliary history, they were not fighting alone. Captain Elias Carter's voice came through the comms. "We've seen Sci-Fi raiders before. They hit fast and take what they want. But if we hold the line together, we can stop them." Virelia nodded. "Then we stand as one. No retreat. No surrender." Her warriors roared in agreement. Even the skeptical Varish stood at her side, his hands gripping the controls of the main weapon systems. He had once doubted the humans, but now he was ready to fight beside them. The battle was about to begin. The first strike. The Sci-Fi ships opened fire first. Bright red energy bolts streaked across space, slamming into shields. The Auxiliary flagship shook under the impact, but it held. "Hold steady," Virelia commanded. The human fleet fired back immediately, their railguns launching high-speed projectiles that tore through the enemy ranks. Unlike Zafar energy weapons, Human projectiles didn't lose power over distance. Each shot punched holes through enemy armor, forcing the Sci-Fi ships to adjust their formation. The auxiliary joined the attack. Their plasma cannons lit up the battlefield, burning through enemy shields. But the Sci-Fi were relentless. "They're moving to flank us," Varish warned. Carter's voice came through again. "Leave it to us." Two human destroyers broke formation, moving swiftly to intercept the enemy flankers. Their maneuverability surprised the Sci-Fi, forcing them to split their attack. The humans did not just fight with brute force, they fought with strategy. Varelia clenched her fists. She had underestimated them for too long. A desperate gamble. Despite their coordination, the Sci-Fi had numbers on their side. More enemy ships warped into the battlefield, overwhelming both fleets. Varish growled, "We cannot hold much longer." Virelia's mind raced. The Sci-Fi were focused on destroying their ships, but their real weakness was their command vessel. If they could take out the Sci-Fi flagship, the enemy fleet would collapse into chaos. She turned to Carter. "We must strike their leader. If we cut off the head, the body will fall." Carter grinned. "Now you're thinking like a human." Together, they devised a risky plan. The auxiliary would feign a retreat, drawing the Sci-Fi in. Meanwhile, a small human strike team would slip past enemy lines and board the Sci-Fi flagship. It was a dangerous gamble, but it was their only chance. The turning point. The auxiliary ships pulled back, pretending to be on the verge of defeat. The Sci-Fi fell for the bait, pushing forward aggressively. That was when the humans struck. A stealth shuttle, carrying Carter and his elite soldiers, slipped through the chaos and landed on the Sci-Fi command ship. The battle outside raged on, but inside, the real fight was about to begin. The humans moved fast, their weapons precise. They pushed toward the Sci-Fi control room, cutting through resistance with military efficiency. Meanwhile, Varelia and her fleet held the line, giving them enough time to complete the mission. Every second felt like an eternity. Then, suddenly, "Mission complete. Their command systems are down," Carter's voice came through. Seconds later, the Sci-Fi flagship erupted in a massive explosion. Their fleet, now leaderless, fell into disarray. Varelia seized the moment. "All ships, attack." The combined human and auxiliary forces pushed forward, cutting through the scattered enemy ranks. Without their leader, the Sci-Fi broke formation and fled, their once mighty fleet now nothing but wreckage and retreating vessels. Victory was theirs, a new beginning. As the battlefield cleared, Varelia stood on the bridge, watching the stars. They had won, not just the battle, but something greater. A new alliance had been forged. Carter's face appeared on the screen. He was smiling. "Not bad for a bunch of primitive humans, huh?" Varelia let out a rare chuckle. "I was mistaken about your people. I see now why you survive, why you thrive." She turned to her warriors. "The humans have shown us strength, not through conquest, but through unity. We have much to learn." Varish, once the strongest skeptic, bowed his head slightly. "Perhaps we do." For the first time in auxiliary history, they had fought alongside another species and emerged stronger because of it. Varelia took one last look at the human fleet, now no longer just allies, but partners. The future of their people had changed forever. And this was only the beginning.